Alright friends, in this video I'm going to compare the Honda GB350S, the Kawasaki W230 and the Royal Enfield Bullet 350. I am just going to focus on how these bikes actually feel to ride. No spec sheets, no price comparisons. You can find all that elsewhere. What I want to give you is the kind of insight you won't get from reading a marketing brochure. You can go and watch other YouTubers if you're into that. I'll start by comparing the bikes across a few key areas: engine, suspension, ergonomics, handling and brakes. After that, I'll tell you which bike I think suits which type of rider best, whether you're the sporty type, the laid-back and carefree kind, or just a retro lover. And finally, I'll share my personal ranking and explain why I chose it. I deliberately chose not to generate any additional video footage of the bikes, since this video is a bit of an experiment really. I just want to see if my opinion alone is enough to keep you interested. So let me know in the comments if you think this was a good idea. If you're happy with a comparison video this simple, I'll gladly make more like it in the future. And now we can start the actual comparison. Engines first. In this category, the Honda and the Enfield are more similar, while the Kawasaki definitely feels different, as it has a much shorter stroke and quite a lot less capacity. It's lacking that satisfying long stroke thump that both the GB and Bullet have. But this doesn't mean the W230 is slower from the get-go. Since it comes with a 6-speed gearbox and a higher revving engine, it makes up for the lack of torque when accelerating. I'd say the Honda and the Kawasaki are equally fast, while the Enfield probably is a bit slower. I don't have any precise measurements, however, so do take this information with a pinch of salt. But it's a fact that the W230 feels more lively, while the other two are on the lazier, almost lethargic side. For their main purpose, however, which I think is riding at a relaxed pace, naturally the long stroke engines feel more satisfying when accelerating. The same goes for the sound. The Honda creates a lovely tune which most people would call the best sounding of the three. The Bullet comes with more of an old-school, tractorish sound, which I personally prefer because it sounds more like an old bike. The W230's noise isn't as rich. It's fairly neutral and probably underwhelming to some ears. The particular model I rode, the Meguro S1 variant, also produced a rattling and mildly annoying sound coming from some vibrating metal parts. Although it has to be said that this mild annoyance actually fits the retro theme quite well. When looking at the gearbox, the Kawasaki is the clear winner though. Easy to shift with a nice bit of feedback on the lever. The one on the Honda feels indifferent. The Bullet has the opposite of a crisp gearbox, which doesn't really like the idea of quick changes, but it puts those cogwheels into position with a very rewarding clonk sensation. None of the three let you feel any nasty vibrations when going at a steady pace with RPM levels that would be considered normal by your fellow non-riding humans. The suspension chapter isn't quite as extensive and probably not even that interesting. I was surprised, however, that the damping performance of both the Honda and the Kawasaki offers a surprisingly good compromise between stability and comfort, especially for bikes from this price range. The GB is particularly impressive. Plenty of stability when going faster while not punishing your back when going over bumps. I was pleased with the cover as well in terms of stability. On rough roads, however, you suffer a bit more, which is mostly caused by its cheaply padded seat. The Bullet shows a much softer side. It nicely melts away bumps and cracks, but it lags a bit behind when it comes to speed of operation. It's easier to overwhelm the bike's stability when going for fast direction changes. The two Japanese machines gladly embrace a bit of a racer spirit, the Indian one not so much. When it comes to the way the bikes have you seated, I'd say the GB again takes the crown. Its ergonomics are a nice mix between front wheel orientation and relaxed upper body. You feel like you're in control, receive decent feedback and still are completely relaxed. And it also fits me nicely, a guy being 184 centimeters tall with rather long sticks, legs. The W230 unfortunately is slightly too small for my height. My legs feel mildly cramped, and the way the footpegs are placed, it reminds me a bit of sitting on my toilet back home. Which is not a bad place to be, obviously. Like this, I want to point out that it's not that bad. You're also further away from the front compared to the GB. If it wasn't for my legs, it would remind me a bit of sitting on a chilled scrambler, actually. A sitting position that feels like not having a single care in the world. Relaxed and fun, just not competitive. The Bullet is similar to the Kawa when it comes to being very relaxed and the distance to the front. Since its footpegs are mounted lower and further in the front though, I don't run into any trouble with my legs. The Enfield fits me well and its orientation is just what I want on a slow retro. Upright, healthy distance to the bars, more on the inactive side. The placement of your feet is almost cruiser-like. It feels very comfy. The best compromise, as mentioned, is offered by the Honda though. The Honda also has by far the most lean angle clearance. You really have to tip it over quite a bit before the footpegs touch down. That's definitely not the case with the other two. The Kawasaki still gives you a fair amount before its long feelers start scraping. Though those feelers are probably necessary because from what I could tell the exhaust would soon follow. The Bullet offers the least lean angle before touching down. It's not as limited as your typical cruiser, but it's definitely less than the Kawa and a lot less than what the Honda lets you get away with. So what about the handling? How do they feel when entering and riding through a corner? Well, no surprises here, although there has been a bit of a disappointment. I'm saying no surprises because A, all three bikes handle accordingly to their smaller size and weight. The differences I'll now explain are nuances. Please keep that in mind. And B, because the Kawasaki wins. Which is no surprise because Kawasaki bikes almost always shine in terms of handling. I'll start with the minor disappointment, which, surprisingly, comes from the Honda. Which, admittedly, I've been only able to spot because I went for the Kawasaki straight after. The GB350S doesn't handle as well as it could, or, in this particular case, as well as the Kawa. It's asking for a bit more force on the bars to enter lean, from which it then has a slight tendency to drop further into by itself, but only for a tiny bit. It simply does not handle fully harmoniously, so it will ask for minor corrections over the bars when in lean. It's not perfectly neutral. But again, to be sure not to be misunderstood, its misbehavior is really minor. Most riders will never notice, and that includes myself. Like I said, only the perfectly handling W230 revealed this imperfection to me. It is so minor that I'm fairly sure it could be wiped away with changing the tires, for example. And now you already heard about the Kawasaki. It truly shines in the handling department. It is a very lightweight bike and it absolutely feels like that, but without being nervous or unstable. Zero force necessary to turn in, perfectly neutral during lean, and absolute joy in the twisties. The Bullet is very similar to other Enfields from this engine size. It needs a healthy bit of force to enter lean, which it then goes through completely neutral though. It therefore is also very enjoyable while cornering. And with these, as I can't stress this enough, minor differences, we conclude the handling chapter. Slowing down your forward motion can be done equally efficiently on both Japanese contestants. Both bikes need a solid amount of pressure on the lever to brake harder, but this is very expected when looking at the hardware being used. In terms of maximum brake force possible, the Kawasaki wins, a victory probably achieved by its lightweight. The Bullet, however, can give you a bit of a shock when pulling its brake lever for the first time. It truly acts in accordance with the retro spirit. Just like many vintage bikes out there, its front brake delivers a bit of a terrifying performance. It indeed is rather weak. I mean, compared to some really old machines, it still performs okay with enough force on the lever. But when compared to its modern competition, it certainly does not. The Bullet's rear brake, however, is much larger than what we're used to here in Europe. It also works more efficiently than the ones on its counterparts. So in the end, when going for a relaxed ride, you're perfectly fine sticking to just the rear brake, even for achieving deceleration values for which you'd normally use the front brake on other motorcycles. Now that I'm done with my categories, I'll continue with my which bike for which type of rider recommendation and then conclude this video with my personal ranking. If you consider yourself to be on the sportier side, as ridiculous as this actually sounds when talking about low-powered retros, there is a definite best choice to be made. I think it's most important to have good stability and, which is even more important, a seating position that gives you the best feeling of being in control. It's a shame that the engine feels a bit lethargic, but nevertheless, the Honda GB350S clearly is your best choice. If you want a bike that gives you the carefree experience, this wonderful feeling you get when you've managed to let go of your constricting ego-centered thoughts, the bike that represents the unbearable lightness of being, the Kawasaki is your best friend. It handles perfectly, flicks around like a bicycle, and has a pounding heart that resembles the one of a juvenile gazelle rather than the one of an elderly boar. Plus, its lightweight makes it the best choice for city commutes, in my opinion. Now, if you're on the hunt for a retro bike that gives you that wonderful experience of decelerating, that slows you down in a joyful manner, all three candidates will do nicely. I honestly enjoyed all of them immensely. They all look stunning and they all feel great when riding at a relaxed pace. You'll just have to decide for yourself if you prefer being a member of the long stroke or the short stroke party. That's all. So, any of you might want to guess my personal favorite? Well, you can't. And here's why. As I've just said, I love all three of them. I really mean it. But in terms of my own feeling of satisfaction while riding, still, there certainly are differences. The Honda is my number 3. It actually wins the most categories of this comparison, but to me personally it lacks something that I call coherence. I want a bike to make sense as a whole. When it comes to small retros, I'm looking for the motorcycle that feels the most satisfying when riding slowly. And for this use case, the Honda has minor shortcomings. Its handling is not as harmonious and neutral as it could be, and operating its gearbox feels bland. And to me personally, these two are big contributing factors when it comes to enjoying a relaxed ride. The Kawasaki, however, handles truly magnificently. Its gears fall into place in a crisp manner, but it's lacking the satisfying feel and vibrations of a long-stroke engine when accelerating. Like I said, it's my winner in the city, but since all of my relaxed rides take place in a beautiful Austrian countryside, it's only good enough for spot number 2. My clear winner when it comes to sheer satisfaction felt when riding chilled is the Enfield, by far. And that's what I mean with you not being able to have guessed that. Because when comparing and judging the bikes objectively, the Bullet is the worst. But an objective rating of machines has nothing to do with my personal preferences. I don't mind having to apply force to enter lean as long as the bike acts perfectly neutral afterwards. I want to feel a satisfying clonk every time I change a gear. I want a really soft ride. I want a shockingly bad front brake performance that makes me giggle and at the same time reminds me of my own mortality, but at the same time I want to have a strong rear brake that allows for carefree cruising. I want a bike that sounds like a very friendly, tiny tractor. I want a bike that feels old but is being made today. And because I want just that, the Royal Enfield Bullet 350 is my absolute favorite among the small retros. Thank you for watching and listening.